Welcome to the Armchair Constituents, the weekly podcast about news topics. While we're not experts or academics, we do like to speak our voice freely. And keep in mind that as the facts change, so can our opinions.
We are now about to present the main attraction of our world-famous show.
And we are live. This is the Armchair Constituents, episode 14, recorded on the evening of July 16th, 2017. I'm Jeff, here with Kramer. Say something, Kramer.
Hi.
Well,
We're about an hour and a half into this already, so...
We are 24 seconds into this. They didn't hear the first part. All right, and we have a guest this week, our friend Brandon. No, we didn't record it yet.
Hello.
Yeah, Brandon's here. This is our first guest. We're going to try having these once a month, and hopefully the pre-show discussions are less than this one was.
Oh, believe me, I'm already terrified.
Let's
already been yelling at each other.
So, well, the good news is there's no updates this week, so that's like 30 minutes of the podcast taken care of from the start. We're gonna move right into topics, which we're gonna start with Donald Trump Jr. this week. Kramer, you wanna hit that one, the finer points?
Yeah. So Donald Trump Jr. was kind enough to let everyone know that he did, in fact, have meetings with a Russian attorney who emailed him and said, hey, just so you know, we have some information on Hillary Clinton that I think you might want because we also want your father to be president. And he said that he would love that. And so the attorney comes to Trump Towers where they met, right? And they had a nice little chit-chat. Apparently the information was not good enough for baby Trump. And they ended up turning him down. And so I think this really does go to show once and for all that the president was right. His campaign had no contacts with Russia, and this can really be put to bed. This Democratic witch hunt.
They had no contact with Russia, even though Kushner and Manafort were both in on this meeting. Kushner claims he left early, so I guess that makes it okay. And he went back and fixed his contacts and added a slew of foreign contacts that he didn't think were necessary to tell anybody about. But yeah, there's
Ruski 1, Ruski 2, Ruski 3.
So I looked into this woman because it was two people they met with. The lawyer was Natalia Veselnitskaya. I hope I said that right.
That was pretty solid.
Yeah, and then we have the Russian American lobbyist and former Soviet military officer Renette Anaxunamun. That's not his real name, but I'm not trying to pronounce that name.
I was like, damn.
Great Brendan Fraser reference.
I'm
Anaxunamun.
glad you like that. But yeah, so essentially what it seemed like this was all just to discuss Russian adoptions. Veselnitskaya was somebody that she opposes the Magnitsky Act, which blacklists Russians suspected of human rights violations, which is the reason why Americans can't adopt Russian children. Putin put that ban into place. I don't know. It just seemed like this is what they mentioned. This is what this meeting was about. The big thing here is he covered it up, and now he's trying to come out and release the emails in a tweet. So he seems like he's open and honest, even though he didn't release this till he got caught. Correct?
Yeah, the Times was about to publish the story saying, hey, we got this. And he was like, oh, crap, I got to steal their thunder.
Guys, just so you know, I'm totally going to tell you about this.
I was getting to telling you. I just needed to get my thoughts together for a year.
This has been covered by pretty much every outlet this week, over and over and over again. But it's pretty damning. Once again, I don't think anything's going to come of this. Like that, you have some of the liberal media outlets trying to claim it's treason and legal action should be taken and all kinds of. I don't see that happening. I mean, I don't know what the
I think,
classification for treason is, but I don't see how this could be treason.
This isn't necessarily treason, but it's definitely, that's the kind of source of the debate, is really, is something going to happen to Trump Jr.? Is somebody going to do something about this? But the reality is no. But the other thing that comes into it is the way the Russians came about the information. So like the Russians supposedly acquired this information about Hillary Clinton through hacking. And so that's part of the problem, is that
Well, did they
Trump Jr.
actually
was
have
actively receiving
information?
information.
Because
Well, supposedly they did, and Trump Jr. accepted it. You know, he instead of reporting the emails and instead of going to the authorities about the supposed information that the Russians had for Hillary based on their hacking, instead of going to the authorities, he accepted it in a response email, which he freely typed up and or tweeted. He just responded with, "Sounds good," you know, or "I'll really appreciate this. This is going to do great for us." And so that's kind of like the big debate. It's like, should something happen because he didn't go to the authorities?
That's what I meant. But the lawyer said that there was never any information. Essentially, she lied to get the meeting.
Oh, absolutely.
So
that's
now the Russians had it. She's denying any ties with the Kremlin or anything like that. But yeah, it's the fact that he accepted this to try to get information on Hillary Clinton that was obtained illegally. And then covered it up. I mean, he's a private citizen. So that's the thing, is it's not so much him covering it up, correct? It's Kushner and Manafort that didn't claim this information or claim this contact.
Right. I was gonna say it'd be different if it was like from an official campaign email, but it was from his personal email. But the official campaign personnel were involved in the meeting.
Right.
So.
Yeah, smarter people than us are covering this, but I don't see a smoking gun.
I mean,
here. I just see a cover up that makes them look
Just,
really guilty. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think there's any fire in this hole, but the smoke is getting much thicker, and it's odd how the slow trickle of information like this has just become so commonplace about any possible connection between the Trump campaign and Russia. But it's just another piece of incredibly large evidence that is totally unjustifiable or inactionable against the president himself. And I understand that that there is something to this, that it's important to be discussed, but I feel like people that are talking about this being treasonous are also the people trying to bring the 25th Amendment into play here and get psychologists to analyze his brain while they just sit and listen to his speeches. It's alarming and it's really bad.
Right.
What was that? I'm sorry.
Nothing. I was just making a terrible joke. Go.
I thought it was a good joke. He is insane, but But I think, it's kind of like, that's kind of why we talk about it. It's really the only people that make extreme decisions are the people who are known for making extreme decisions. Like the people who are saying throw him in jail are usually the first people to say that when this kind of thing comes up, and then the other, and vice versa. So it's an interesting. I like that analogy though, the thickening smoke, because it is. It's just another inactionable allegation against the president.
Kramer dropped it. There he is.
Is he back?
Yeah, you back, Kramer?
He's dead.
Oh, he must be. That's
Good thing we can
discouraging
edit.
considering his next topic.
He's typing.
Yeah, it's messing up. All right, can you talk?
Came back in. I made it.
All right.
Edit here.
I don't even know if I'm gonna edit it. Honestly, just fuck. We just keep on going. I think we covered that enough. Did you have any final statements there, Kramer?
I actually don't know what has been said for the past 3 minutes, because after I spoke, I heard a lot. You know that bit that Chevy Chase does where he has his voice break in and out of everything? That's what I heard for 3 minutes. I logged off. I came back on. A robot had a seizure in my ear, and I had this horrible squelching, and then you two were laughing maniacally.
Oh, good.
That's essentially what happened.
No, so
You're not wrong.
that's remarkably accurate for someone who's not involved.
Okay, well, let's. I I think we got it enough. There's not really anything else to say here.
I essentially
Yeah.
just agreed with you, Kramer.
Oh,
Basically,
perfect.
it's just again, it's another inactionable thing.
You had a
against the president that-
good analogy with the thickening smoke. So
Yeah.
keep that in
Bravo.
mind.
See, I got a
Bravo.
good analogy in now.
Bravo.
Yes, he has
We're off to a
made
great
way.
start.
Controversy earlier.
He has made way for bookstores. Let's see.
He's paving the way for his future.
I'm glad
analogies.
I'm glad you're back because Trinity
He
Lutheran
doesn't have analogies.
the SCOTUS decision for the the case of Trinity Lutheran versus what state are they from, Kramer? You know this, right?
Missouri.
Missouri.
All right.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've been wanting to talk about this for weeks. It was in the Lost episode, and we never got back
I'm
to it.
super
so
glad we didn't touch on it then.
Here is
That was just awful.
well, we did touch on it. We just didn't release it. Here you go. Here's your platform. Let's go.
Yeah, so I'm really interested in the Trinity case, and I did want to do it when we had Brandon here because I think this will be a really good discussion because Jeff and I know how we feel about it already. So with the Trinity case, Trinity Lutheran is in Missouri. They got apparently the state of Missouri gives out grants every year. The church applied, and the state of Missouri said, "Well, no, you can't do that. Our state constitution doesn't allow government dollars to go to churches," and they were going to use it to get some chopped up tire bits for their playground. Goes all the way to the Supreme Court, which brings up an interesting question in of itself. I think we might want to talk about in a second. But Supreme Court says, look, if the church does not get these government dollars, then you are discriminating against the church based off of their religious affiliation, which is very interesting. So I have a couple thoughts on this. One, I question whether or not this should have gone to the Supreme Court to begin with. Missouri State Constitution says that that they don't do this, but it brings up a question of should it have even gone, which I think is a worthwhile question to ask and discuss. But the other thing, I'm opposed to this on two fronts. One, I don't like churches or mosques or synagogues or whatever they call Scientology buildings.
Wait,
hellholes. That's it.
Hey,
Banks.
your mother listens to this podcast. I just want you to know that your mother is going to hear what you
The
just
old
said.
reminder.
Oh man, she and I talked the other day, and she was like, "You were the only one cursing, Kramer." She said you said you both cursed a lot,
I
but
know.
you were doing the cursing.
I took that as a personal challenge to start cussing more. That's what
Don't you curse at my mother, Jeff. Don't you curse at her.
I don't know why, but in my head, your mother is like a really old, frail woman. The way you describe her, Mr. Kramer, you were cussing more than the other boys.
Oh,
Why
God.
does my mother sound like a Nick Swardson skit?
Yes.
This
so
gallon of
strong.
milk.
She is
This kind of
definitely
milk right
gonna
here.
She's definitely going
Okay,
to call
but-
in now.
Anyway,
Kramer, hold the phone up to the microphone so I can speak.
Let's divert back to the story before we go.
All right.
too
So
far.
anyway, yeah. So I'm opposed to this for a couple of reasons. I don't like. I love the freedom of religion, but I don't like the government giving money to religious organizations. That's one reason I'm opposed to this. The second reason was actually a group of conservative Baptists did not want the church to get the money because they said, as a religious institution, we are free from a host of government regulations, things like taxes. And I know. And they said, we don't want that money because if we take the money, there's strings with it. And then we have to start changing how we use the money, potentially changing our behavior, and it will affect the way that we worship, which was a very interesting argument. So there were some religious folks that did not want this to go through because it may undermine the independence of some worshipers, potentially. So let's have a conversation about this.
Well, I agree with you pretty much in every aspect of this. I don't see why the state was forced by the Supreme Court to give money to a religious organization. I don't understand. We hadn't talked about it before, but I don't understand why I went to the Supreme Court in the first place. It seems pretty cut and dry. It's in the Missouri State Constitution, correct? That's what you said.
Yeah. There you have apparently a very restrictive state constitution. Like we thought we had an establishment clause at the federal level. They've apparently Donald Trump did build a wall, and it was between.
So
Church
in
and state of
essence,
Missouri.
the Supreme Court overrode their constitution, basically making that clause null and void, right?
Yeah, they overrode the state constitution and said
Yeah.
that to deny them because they are religious is a discrimination.
Yeah, no, fuck that.
I just don't buy that. I don't buy that line of thinking.
Yeah, I just no, that doesn't make any sense. To tell somebody to tell a state that basically void a state's constitution because they don't want to give funding to a church to put tire bits in their playground is not racist at all.
Racist?
Didn't you say that? Yeah, not racist. You know, I was gonna do an analogy towards race, and then let's just forget that happened. But yeah, no, it's not going against their religion at all. I mean, it would. I could understand if it was and here's where I was going with the analogy. If it was a ethnic community center that they decided not to give funding to based on what ethnicity, that I can understand going to Supreme Court and being discussed. Not federal state funding going to a religious group, a church. I don't know. Most churches I've ever been to have built-in fundraising events to do these kind of things.
Yeah. My church, I think, had 4 offerings a week.
So
Mine's
if I
knocking
may,
on the door right now.
so the problem that I have with it is that it's a church. So there's already they shouldn't have gone to the Supreme Court because it should have been handled at the state level because the Constitution. But
Because the Constitution.
It's separation.
He's
of
up there,
church and
Sean
state.
Hannity.
It's separation of church and state at the base level. Like it's just there's a reason you're not paying. It's the same argument that the Baptist church that you were talking about earlier. That their argument, they're not paying taxes. They're not. There's a lot of things that they're exempt from because they're a house of God per se. And here's my thing: is if it was a public park, maybe it'd be different. If it was a no name, just public use, public owned by the county or whatever park, that'd be different. But it is the church's park. It's the church's playground, and it's like, so for them to come in, and so they were saying their argument when they went up into court was that the program itself that the government was using to give grants and stuff was a secular it was a totally neutral aid program, and so that's why they were saying, oh well, by not giving it to the church is like kind of discriminating against it because it's a church. It's like, no, it's still government funds, and that's the base of it. It's just you don't pay taxes, so why should you have access to those funds?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and now does this because this can't just affect Missouri. This basically calls into question every single establishment clause in the country. It changes everything.
Yeah,
and they've already removed well, and this is going off topic, but they've already removed the restrictions allowing priests, pastors to speak about politics in the pulpit, right? That's been removed.
That was a little overblown. It's not everything that people like Rachel Maddow said it was, but it's not everything that the hardline religious right wanted. Yeah, basically it was that pastors can't speak, and it's not the Hyde amendments about Planned Parenthood. I can't remember what this one is. The Johnston Act, Johnston Amendment. I think that's it. It was apparently when Trump signed that piece of legislation, it was just really symbolic, and
Okay. All right. Well.
Yeah, but for me, one of the interesting things about this is this brings up a lot of question of the funding of private religious schools. And I understand that legally, and I suppose in the eye of the courts, there is a huge leap from getting state funds to go to a park, which in theory can be used outside of a proselytizing mission that the church has. You can play on that park if you don't go to the church. In theory, if you maybe violate their property rights or whatever, and just show up. But I mean, it does bring in potential questions of how can this money be used if you have if the state or the federal government is giving out money and a religious institution qualifies for educational purposes. I mean, in theory, it could potentially lead to a circumstance where we're funding private religious education.
Well, even if it's not like a private school, like I'm assuming you're talking about like a grade school, like.
Yeah, we got a bunch of them.
So, but even then, like, what if can they just apply for this grant again or a different grant in another state to build a Sunday school onto their church, and you can't deny it because it would be against the law? So now we're funding church construction with funds, government funds, which goes completely against the Constitution. I just don't understand how they came to this decision at all.
From
There's
what
gotta
I
be something
understand,
else that we're missing for why they. I just don't get it.
I think from what I understand, basically, and someone correct me on this if I'm wrong, is that Trinity Lutheran argued that the playground is not part of their religious regalia. I don't know if that's the right word. I mean, it's not a sash or anything. It's not part of what they use to proselytize. That's what they argued. I mean, it's a playground for the church on church property, but their argument was, in theory, it's ours and it's on our property, but we like to think of it as like a public park, and so people are more than welcome to use it, and that must have been enough so that
We
they
like
could
to
go.
think of it as everybody's, unless you're a
Right.
Muslim.
I'm going to start saying that. I'm actually going to go to the government and ask for somebody to put a pool in my backyard and say, well, it's everybody's pool, but like,
Yeah.
I'm absolutely going to control who comes into my pool.
I
but
just
in
want
the eyes of the law, yeah.
Right. Now,
everybody. It's
just to play
everybody.
devil's
no
advocate,
Irish, no
I'm
Irish.
sure
just-
they're letting
fucking
the
Irish.
public play on the park, but it is still construction. And no, it's not construction. They're just laying tire bits down, but it's still government funds going towards something being added or built onto a church. And
That's all it is. It opens that can of worms that you were just talking
Yeah,
about.
I think
because
the
now
bigger
you've
thing
set a
here-
precedent where they can grow this. Well, you put tire bits in. Why can't you give us mulch? We need a new swing set. We need a new door to the church. We need a new organ, and now you're.
I want a
building the church.
Tesla.
Now you're building the church for us. We appreciate the funding.
It's for the community, so the
Yeah, it's a
churches-
community. Everybody can come.
Community
We're
church.
letting
So, like,
homeless
anybody.
people in as long as they're
Hell,
Christian.
if you're an Islam, if you believe in Islam, if you're a Buddhist, whatever, doesn't matter. You can come into our church. That's fine.
Just don't speak about
You'll
it.
start believing properly or burst into flames.
Turns out nobody's bursting into flames. Weird.
Darndest thing.
Seems
Darn
like
it.
a
I
law.
think-
This seems like a law that
This-
would pass in Texas.
Yeah, right.
I think we're one step closer
We're
to
pretty
world
close.
brotherhood.
Alright,
But
so-
and then I think a lot of the issues like this one, I don't know. So it opens up the question about a lot of things, like why is the church testing that border between state and church? You know what I mean? Like that definitive line that we drew. Why are they pushing it? Like the Mormon Church. I don't know if you guys have heard about that, but the Mormon Church donating.
I'm familiar with Mormons.
The Mormon Church has been donating hundreds of thousands of dollars to stop the legalization of marijuana in some states.
Oh, that's
And
right,
but they claim that it's just generous donations from people within the church. But if you follow the lines, it all goes back to the Mormon Church. But it's like, if you want to play that much of a part in politics, why aren't you paying taxes?
yeah. Just
Right.
form a super PAC. It's basically a church
That's
anyway.
a different. That's a whole different
I know.
conversation. I find that
I know,
interesting.
but I'm saying
I find that really.
all the lines go back.
Because I understand why they're doing it. Like what Mormons believe is you're not to ingest anything, which I'm not telling you. I'm assuming a lot of you probably know this.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say it though. Anything you ingest that alters your mindset or how you feel is bad.
Had one too many frescoes last night. Feel like hell this morning.
I'm gonna fucking legalize that.
Nicotine, caffeine,
Legalize
alcohol,
Fresca.
all that stuff. So yeah,
No,
I can
just
understand
Fresca.
why they're doing it. I just don't Yeah, that's a whole different discussion. I'd like to have that sometime.
It
but we
is,
don't-
but
That would be. Yeah.
just to tie it back to this topic is, I wouldn't have a problem with it if there wasn't that definitive line. Like if they were paying taxes, then this wouldn't be an issue because they're giving to the system that would be giving them the money back. If that makes sense.
Right.
No, 100.
So-
I agree 100%. But for me, there is I guess I'll take off my logical reasoning hat and I'll put on my guy that lives in a small town hat, where there's a part of you that's like, there's a practical component to why we have the Establishment Clause, to why we have the separation of church and state and things like that. And we do have big grandiose fears of, Jerry Falwell Jr. somehow getting into the presidency and making a giant theocracy. And so, the
All
Establishment
right,
Clause is good for
I
things
need
like
you to
that.
calm the fuck down. That is not something that needs to be talked about.
It's like, all right, hold on. I'm gonna crack my knuckles real quick. We're getting into this.
Woo!
Gotta stretch it
Keyboard
out.
warrior's raring to go.
Mom, let me get a beer.
Oh God.
But anyway,
Kidding, I don't live with my mom.
it's but anyway, so at the meatloaf. But there's a practical component of it too. At the same time, I'm like, I understand, like, it's just tire bits. Like, why if it's such a big deal to you as a religious institution, that if what's truly important, what they say is important, is the safety of the children. The tire bits, they need them, and apparently they also talk like bad impressions of Christopher Walken. Why didn't the community just rally and chop up some tires? It's like they could have very easily done that.
Also, can we discuss the fact that tire bits tear your legs to shit?
So it's not.
You're hurting the children.
Tire bits. We use them. So for the listeners that don't know, I'm in the Marine Corps, and all of our training pits and everything are all filled with the same stuff. It's basically it's a mulch that's made from recycled rubber from the tires. So they remove all the metal, they remove everything. It's just the rubber, because there's no other way of getting rid of it other than burning it, which is bad for the environment, blah blah blah. But so instead they shred the rubber into a fine mulch. It's not like powder, but it's soft and spongy. So like when you fall, it catches your fall and you can kind of keep on going. So
Time after time.
Yeah.
All right.
Good.
I think we've beaten this topic to death.
Yeah.
Any last words before we move on to healthcare?
My arm hurts from the circle jerk that was. Let's get to something we disagree on.
Rubber.
Well, do we all? I don't know that we disagree on healthcare. Our last two topics will be fun, but healthcare.
Yeah.
All right. So Thursday, they unveiled the Republican Senate unveiled their healthcare plan, the rewritten, revised healthcare plan. Hasn't been voted on yet. Mitch McConnell delayed the recess until August, I believe the 4th.
No, later than that. So
later than that. Okay.
Yeah, there's always an August recess built into the Senate so that they can kind of take a break. It's like just basically a vacation month. And what he's done is he's delayed it's supposed to start at the beginning of August, and instead he's pushed the recess to 3/4 of the way through August so that they can cover these important things. But like, I guess the rest of Senate is pissed because that's their vacation time basically. It originates from back when there was not enough AC and stuff to like counteract the heat of the summer. So like the chambers would get really, really hot. And so they would take the break during August. Well, it's kind of been, they'd fixed the AC problem, but now like they're noticing performance issues within the senators because they're like, we've been working day in, day out, every day, all year. So let's take a break during August. So they just kind of use that. So what Mitch has done is basically pushed the recess until 3/4 of the way through August, which is kind of making people mad. But it's because he's trying to like cover these.
It made John McCain really mad because he had to go in for surgery.
The history of the August recess that you just went through, I love the bit at the end. Yeah, they finally fixed the AC. Like it's just some housekeeping.
Like for hundreds of years, they've just been like on one AC system, and they're like, "Fuck, man, we got to really fix that thing." You know, like it's hot as hell in here, man. Like, why don't you take the month off?
Well,
it's really
I'm glad.
hot.
Well, now we all know the history of the air conditioning services in the Senate.
You're welcome.
In the chambers.
Okay, so John McCain had to have surgery to remove a blood clot, so he's out of commission for a short while. And on top of that, we still have, they don't have exact numbers. They say 8 to 10 Republican senators that have expressed serious concerns over this health care bill. The vocal one is Susan Collins.
Is she from Maine?
I don't know. You have the internet?
I don't know. We'll find out after the last topic.
Hey!
Oh!
Nice tie-in.
Ooh.
Boom!
All right.
Yeah, she's Maine.
Okay. She won't even agree to vote to debate this bill in its current form, which we're going to talk about its current form. She said she doesn't know whether or not it'll pass, but she knows basically for them to make these fundamental changes to Medicaid without any kind of hearing on the consequences, she can't vote for something like that. It is in her opinion, which I find refreshing that she's just not going to vote with her party, even though it seems like there's a good chunk that just won't do it for varying reasons.
Yeah, it's been interesting during this watching some of the moderate Republicans come out. Susan Collins out of Maine, whoever that Republican is out of Nevada, both of them stood up and said, "I'm not going to vote for this because it goes too far." I mean, we're used to hearing, Justin Amash and Rand Paul go, "Freer the markets, the freer the people,"
Well,
and talk about how it doesn't do enough.
Yeah,
But
the big thing
it's
is
kinda nice
the
to-
cuts to Medicaid. It's talking about by 2026, it'd be like $800 billion. By 2036, they would have cut 35% of the funding. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other stuff, but that's the big thing is the Medicaid cuts.
I don't know if President Trump's familiar. I mean, he gave a speech on it, so I'd hope so. We have kind of a drug problem with like opioids or some shit.
Oh yeah, here, hold on.
And
Hold on a second, because let me find it so I can give you the exact numbers.
I think while you're looking real quick, so
Yeah, keep talking.
I like that it's refreshing because, it's kind of annoying that it's already a problem that we have a two-party system and it's so strict. It's like you're either Republican or Democrat or get the fuck out. And I think that it's nice that the Republicans are kind of like the more moderate quote unquote
Well, yeah,
Republicans
they're getting
go,
significant
wait, whoa,
backlash.
we're not doing that.
Yeah, they're getting.
Yeah, it's
okay, so
they
the
have Trump
new
up front with a gun pointing it at the crowd. And
they have it.
wait,
so we
time
have,
out, bro.
What?
Go on.
We have. Oh, I thought you were telling me
no clue
time
what's
out. I didn't
going
realize
on.
you were
I
finishing.
thought
your
you were
tangent.
too, and I'm like, what? Did you have to go pee?
Okay, so they've allocated
Christ.
$45 billion towards a substance abuse treatment program in this bill. So there's a little bit of there's some stuff in here that
It's
isn't
a little
bad.
bit. That's not a lot of money for drug rehab.
What? It's not a lot of money, or it is? Are you? I
I don't think it's nearly enough money to do if you have like a major
Oh.
drug problem. I think it's a spit in the ocean for what you need.
I mean, they can't sign over the keys to the house, but
Oh yeah.
they're still addressing it. It's not. I'm just getting at the fact that there is stuff in here that is pointing in a direction that is resembling good. You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
There's
Now,
stuff. Yeah, it's like this. Yeah.
There's plenty of other stuff. I mean, you have Ted Cruz's amendment, which is allowing insurers to offer stripped down, low cost healthcare plans, which would essentially just be for the early 30s, late 20s crowd that don't really need high premium healthcare that's going to have everything in it. But of course, there's a cost for this. It's going to raise the premiums of everybody else, which is what this healthcare system is all about. Because the old people and the sick people are going to pay more in every facet of the word. I mean, they put in work requirements for Medicaid, but then they said the elderly, who, if you're over 50, you already have to pay more. Your premiums are going up. They're going to be a higher percentage of your income. So I don't understand why it even matters that they're out. They're out of the work requirement. But they have disabled and pregnant people exempt from this too. They changed how much you can save tax free in your healthcare savings plan. They made it higher. But that's another thing. They seem to be out of touch where they believe people can families can save up to $13,300 a year tax free. Or I don't even think it's a year. I think it's in total into a healthcare savings plan. But most families don't have $13,000 just to throw into a tax-free savings account.
Yeah, they're just most people just end up using it for tax shelters. Having a healthcare savings account in HSA. It's a good thing to do. I mean, it's if you have the spare capital to do it. So I mean, I certainly
Well, I mean,
applaud the idea, but it doesn't fundamentally
exists.
address.
It already
Yeah.
exists. It basically just doubles the amount they can put in it. Almost exactly doubles it. It like I said, the age factor, 60 and older, their premiums need to be 16.2% of their income, whereas somewhere below 60, it's like 6.4%. The articles I were reading was saying like 29 years old, so it probably increases steadily up to 16%, but I don't know that for a fact. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. The biggest thing to me is it gets rid of the 10 essential. We talked about it before. The 10 essential things that all health. No, 10 essential the basic healthcare services that your healthcare plan has to have. It gets rid of that, which are like, I have them here: ambulatory services, emergency services, hospitalization, maternity, newborn care, mental health care, prescriptions, rehabilitative and habilitative services and devices, lab services, preventative and wellness services for chronic disease, and pediatric care. So essentially, you can pay for a healthcare plan that doesn't offer healthcare.
Oh,
Now,
what a novel
your state has to waive this. So they have to. So when the healthcare plan goes into place, your state has to apply to have this requirement waived. The healthcare, because I gotta have all the facts here. The healthcare plan has it in place as an option that you're automatically opted into, and your state must opt out. So just to it keeps the subsidies in place, but it changes it as you grow older. The subsidy decreases, so you're forced to pay more out of pocket, and it has a ton of taxes. It keeps the 26 and under rule, so you can stay on your parents' health care. And then, there's a ton of taxes that it changes and gets rid of. It's delaying the Cadillac tax. I've already talked about the health savings account. It changes the deduction threshold for medical expenses from 10% to 7.5%. And, of course, it defunds Planned Parenthood. But that restriction only lasts for a year. So I think I covered everything in it, so now we can discuss it. I didn't cover everything in it, but I covered most of everything in it.
I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Could you run all that by me just one more time?
Yeah, sorry, I missed that. I was texting.
You can both.
Sorry, I was eating. Don't you curse at my mother, Jeff.
I was doing drugs.
Don't accuse me. It also changes the basis for deductibles. So right now, when you go into the marketplace, the average deductible for your healthcare plan is based on the average silver plan, and they switched it to bronze, which is changing deductibles from between $3,600 to $6,100. Oh no, the average deductible right now is about $3,600. It's going to change it to about $6,000, which means you're going to pay more out of pocket when you go to the doctor in the long term.
Right.
So now I've covered everything.
Jesus. Do you have anything else? Anything else you want to?
Oh, I have plenty of other things, but I'm not going to go into every line. I have 20, almost 30 points on this. I can tell you about the Medicare payroll tax they're changing.
I'm good.
Okay.
Hard pass.
Don't get me too aroused. I'll just sit and listen for hours when he gets going.
Do it
on that.
Yeah, keep going. Yeah.
Listen, I'm passionate about healthcare. Damn it.
So it's a hard topic to cover, only because it's like everybody's trying to give their opinion on how to fix the broken system, and why? This is a real general question because I genuinely don't know the answer. But why isn't the government or some sort of entity trying to address the issue of the prices involved in healthcare? So like a lot of the companies, a lot of these hospitals are making money hand over fist over the smallest things, like the $250, shot that they're going to have to give, which only costs like a couple cents to make, and things like that, like the overinflation because of the premium and because of the insurance that they're getting paid.
So I can actually jump in here with this a little bit. I just finished An American Sickness by Elizabeth Rosenthal, and she's a doctor who became a journalist, and she wrote a book about why is American healthcare so damn expensive. And one of the things that she talked about was the rise of insurance led to this. The first insurance company was Blue Cross, and it was based out of Texas. And the hospital had a bunch of debt it needed to cover. So it got a bunch of teachers together in Texas, and they said, look, hey, you give us $25 a year or whatever it was. We'll give you a 3-week stay in the hospital for free. And a lot of them didn't need it. They were able to recoup the money through that and then pay down their debt, and then they were making money. And a lot of insurance functioned like this for a long time. World War II rolls around, you start giving people benefits. Insurance becomes a benefit that people get, and then a lot of people get it, and then you're legally required. And it's how most people get insurance is through their employer. So there's a constantly spiraling demand for it over the last 100 years as we become less and less liable for it. But the other thing is that around the 70s and the 80s, hospitals started to shift because you can't make money in healthcare, not in any ethical way, and it's a hard place to make money in a general sense. But I mean, if you run a hospital, you can make tens of millions of dollars very easily. But people started to be brought in to run hospitals like businesses, whereas it had been nuns when hospitals were religious organizations, or it had been doctors with 50 years experience, and they were considered the best in the state. Business people were brought in, and hospitals were made into machines of efficiency. It's in a lot of it, and this is from her side, and she pushes a little more of a single payer system idea. I think she doesn't come out and blatantly say anything, but basically hospitals in the 80s, in the 70s through the 80s, just started to become businesses. They started to think of themselves as businesses. They started to bill for every little thing that they could bill. And another thing that's tied into this, there is a fear of not doing enough, a doctor being sued. And doctors will call for procedures that they don't need to call for to cover their ass in case they get sued. And so they can say, look, I did this. The second thing is that a lot of doctors' salaries and bonuses are based off of how many procedures they have done and how important the procedure is. There's a practice called upcoding. You have a scale of 1 to 5, how important something is. And it's funny, you can look at the instances of emergency procedures required in hospitals where they weren't coding, or when doctors' salaries or bonuses weren't tied to codes, the number of codes that they had, the severity of the codes, and when they were. And within a couple of years, it went from a pretty even distribution of severeness going 1 through 5 to where like 60% of cases that they saw had a severity rating of 4 or 5, because doctors have a financial incentive to engage in things like that. So I know that was kind of rambly, and that's only part of the picture, but it's very interesting. The history of it's fascinating.
I'm glad that you actually had that to offer, though, because that's something that I've always genuinely wondered about, because I need to read into it a little bit more.
Yeah, look, get An American Sickness by Elizabeth Rosenthal. It's a wonderful read. She does a really interesting section going into the last part of the book. In one chapter, she has different types of healthcare options: a single payer Canada style, an a la carte basic free market system that Singapore has, and then sort of a German mixed system. And she said all of these are vastly different from what the United States has, and all of them are better than the United States. Singapore's healthcare system with regards to responsiveness and prices is better than the United States. And you also have Germany, Canada, Great Britain, all vastly superior.
Yeah.
So she said it doesn't matter what we do. If we go full free market and we want to pretend to be Singapore, that's fine. Something good will happen. If we want to do a single payer, that's fine. But the weird system that we have now is expensive, and it's bloated, and it's not doing very well.
It's extremely broken, and that's my entire point. Is it's a pretty well-known thing, and you see these posts online all the time, especially on Reddit. It's here's my bill for, my stub toe, and it's $4,000.
Yeah.
And so it's a known issue, it's a known broken system, but instead of trying to fix it, I almost feel like every time this healthcare bill, all this stuff comes up, it's how do we try to put a Band-Aid on this?
Yeah.
How do we fix this for now? But there's no bigger conversation to talk about redoing everything. Or that's how it feels to me.
Most of them haven't even read this bill, so there's that. But
yeah,
what does she have to say? So she presented these. What does she have to say about or does she say anything about the argument that changing it to a single payer healthcare system or a free market healthcare system, how the big argument everybody likes to have is if you do these things, it takes away the lucrative nature of healthcare and medicine ceases to be innovative. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that is actually true, but that's a huge argument people try to say is, well, doctors won't be making as much money. They won't want to do this. It'll get slower. There'll be less doctors. Everybody will go to the doctor.
Unfortunately, people suck.
Yeah. Well, she touches on technology a good deal in the book, and the answer that I can give you that she has with related to technology is coming at it from a skew, not head on. And she said she talked about a particular type of laser that's used to treat tumors, and it's a very specific type of cancer and a very specific type of tumor and a very specific type of the human body. It's the only thing this laser is good for, and it is millions and millions of dollars. It's also a very rare form of cancer. hospitals across the country started buying them just so they could advertise. And hospitals are advertising like Wendy's. They probably aren't as salty on Twitter though. They're advertising that they have this awesome new technology and they can help you. And they're essentially useless. I mean, it also brings up a question of diminishing returns. If you have to spend $50 billion to increase, the likelihood of somebody recovering quicker or living by 0.5%, is that a trade-off you're willing to make? We have made huge leaps and bounds technologically, and I mean, I know that a lot of our innovation, especially with regards to medical innovation, comes from a lot of it comes from the military too, and the military probably isn't going to run out of money anytime soon. And like I mean, like I work. Well, never mind. Shouldn't go to that.
Don't.
But but I don't think that necessarily switching over to a single payer system would ruin technology. There are legitimate criticisms of the single payers that are worthwhile, which is that the waits can be longer. I mean, getting organ transplants or being seen by specialists, it's a lot quicker in the United States than it is in Canada or places where they have nationalized healthcare. I mean, there's a trade-off you have to make. I mean, there isn't, and from the most recent thing that I saw with Canada was that there's not a huge difference in care quality either. But
There's
I
also
mean,
not a
you
huge
could talk
difference
to it.
in salary.
Yeah, true.
We looked into that. That's just not true. But you keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. I mean, that being said, there will always be conservative or libertarian-oriented Canadians that will say the healthcare system sucks. But it's really interesting. Pew did some studies on countries' healthcare systems, and a vast majority of people studied in Germany, Canada, the UK.
Is it your
a lot of
dog
them,
or is somebody trapped in a cabinet?
It is. My wife just got in and like she's standing in the kitchen. And let me just go take care of this. Wait 2 seconds. But even though they had a lot of people in these countries that had animosity towards their healthcare systems, the ones that were outside of the United States wouldn't change it at all. Whereas they did the exact same study in the United States. Everybody hates our healthcare system, but there are people that want to change it a lot more than there are in European countries and Canada. Yeah, so it's, who would have thought healthcare is complicated? Certainly not
Weird.
me.
I got that reference. But yeah, no,
I too watch the news.
Yeah, I am really interested in other health. I mean, we've gone into it before where we talked about other countries. And Germany seems really complicated, but everything I hear about how it works, it's really not that complicated. And I could see Americans being okay with the German system of healthcare, since there is you're still paying into it, versus single payer healthcare where they don't consider the taxes payment.
Well,
me personally, I think I prefer a single payer healthcare system where I just view healthcare as a fundamental human right. In America, you shouldn't have to worry about dying from a treatable illness because you don't have the money. And they argue all the time that isn't the case, but I mean, it is the case. People do die because they can't afford adequate health care, or they live less than full lives because they can't afford all the medications that they need for the illness or the disease that they have. And I just don't see that should be the case.
One of the interesting things about that I've encountered, because I just enjoy playing devil's advocate with people, and I was having healthcare arguments with some of my conservative friends, and I was throwing forward arguments that I would personally find convincing about having a single payer system. And the best argument that I've heard for a single payer system is a single payer system is a huge upfront cost. It is, if you take the amount of money that we spend on healthcare now, through direct cost, through taxes, things like, or through money that's not taxed by the government, things like that. If you take that, and that it would cost about an extra $600 billion in theory, with some conservative numbers, to get us over to a single payer system. But the idea and what I found compelling is that it's a long game. Yeah, it's going to be a money suck for the first few years, but as people become healthier, a rising tide lifts all boats, to use the old conservative adage. As people become healthier, they're able to participate in the economy more. They are less of a drain on on medical facilities, and they are healthier, they're better, they're out working more, working harder, paying more taxes, and in the long run, it becomes a much more stable system. That's the most compelling argument I've encountered. I mean, there will always be abuse in this. I mean, there was like a, what, 100, was it 10 or $100 billion, like, you know, healthcare fraud bust that the FBI just did last week. Every system is going to have abuse in it.
Well, I mean, they're talking about in this healthcare bill taking $800 billion from Medicaid. If you had single payer healthcare system, you wouldn't have the need for Medicaid anymore. And considering $800 billion is less than 35% of the actual funds that go in to Medicaid, when I think I found where the money could come from.
Yeah, I think that
I'm sure it's more complicated than that, so I'm not that stupid.
Problem solved.
But
woo,
yeah,
mission accomplished.
We're done here.
solving problems.
Somebody call the president.
Please don't.
We
But yeah,
tweeted
so
at him,
what do
but he
you-
didn't tweet
Mr.
back.
Trump, you're on the line.
What do you think?
I
on
swear to
this?
God, if one of you does an impression of him, I'm hanging the microphone up. I didn't.
I wish I'd known that. I would have prepared one.
Yeah. So, what do you think? What do you think about this, Brandon? Like, I know you probably haven't looked into all the different countries' healthcare plans, but like, just what is
I really
your
wish I had.
what's your consensus on the matter? Like, Obamacare is good, or we should just not have healthcare and you should just eat weeds and herbs to heal yourself.
I mean, it's a hard topic because they do both have compelling arguments, and I think that there's some overlap there, and they see it too, and that's why a lot of the Affordable Care Act stuff is being pulled over into the GOP's bill proposal and stuff like that.
Right.
And yes, there's like, healthcare should be a fundamental human right, and you're not going to be turned away from an ER for not having healthcare. But that's a different situation. And then it comes back to like what you were saying, like those basic like mental health and prescriptions and stuff like that. And that's where it really gets gray and awful, So yes, if you're dying, you're not gonna, or if you're in threat, if your life is being threatened, you're not gonna be turned away from not having healthcare unless you go to like a private like healthcare facility. But if you go to an ER, they legally have to take you in regardless, but you're going to get a big fat bill after.
Yeah, right.
So
yeah, I mean that's the thing too.
And people just don't pay the bill.
Oh yeah, well,
And
because
that's
it gets sent to collections very quickly, and then
right, your credit is fucked for the rest of your life. And
well, I was under the impression, and I could be false, but I believe I've heard this before. Like medical
debt can't be held against you.
Yeah, it can't affect your credit score. But
Well,
I know
then,
you've worked in banking institutions before, so you might know something.
Yeah, we've
no,
both worked for
I
the
think
Fed.
I think you're right.
But yeah, like I said, this seems like
still.
a Band-Aid. Like they want to try to get healthcare off the government's dime, but then they realize how many people they're leaving out in the cold by doing that. But they don't want single-payer healthcare because then it's all in their mind on the government's dime, even though it's taxpayer money that would be paying for it.
Right.
And it's they don't want to like that's why our system is so flawed, is because they don't want to commit to any one strategy. They want to kind of have pieces of everything, and none of it works when you only take little pieces and try to patch them together into something. It just they need to commit to something, and it's still not happening with this.
Like a lot of the issues are kind of long-term issues, or they can be solved with long-term solutions. But
Oh yeah, I mean the way that we got here is a 100-year process.
Right.
We didn't get here overnight. We're certainly not going to fix it to change this overnight. And I think that we will inevitably have a single-payer system. I think it will be 50 years before we get universal, and then we can move on to a proper single-payer, something like that. But I just think it's an inevitability. But I mean, I get some of the concerns, and after speaking with my dad works in the medical field. After talking with my dad and talking with a lot of my friends, and Jeff and I talked about it on here, Charlie Gard, there are always going to be these concerns about the freedom for people to have agency with their own bodies that you are not going to get away from some people. I don't know. don't quite know where I was going with that.
Just say it's complicated again, and we can go. Yeah, it's complicated. And
Yeah,
pat
see,
ourselves
healthcare's
on the
like a
back.
turtle, and
Does the turtle work at Barnes and Noble?
Yes. 100%.
oh, you get one bad analogy, and suddenly you're a Nazi.
Oh, all right.
Okay, geez, turn down.
For what?
We got. All right. Nobody else understands why you just said that except for us. No, everyone's like, "Well, he's a Nazi." Sorry, Mom.
All
Yeah, so
right,
let's
on
move off
to the next topic.
Let's move,
Yeah.
let's move off. The next topic. I almost scrolled past it. Is the discussion, debate, argument, fighting over the removal of Confederate statues. This all kind of started. I say kind of. It all started in 2015 in South Carolina after the shooting. I believe it was. I believe I have this right. The Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church. It's a long name for a church, but yeah. I mean, for when was it was last year or was it this year that New Orleans removed their 4 statues?
It was earlier this year,
Okay.
I think.
The reason we're bringing this up is because Baltimore has recently discussed removing statues that they have, and there's a
I know Baltimore had those. Huh.
yeah, and then Charlottesville and Virginia. Richmond has them too, and there's been discussion, but I haven't really seen or found anything that says there's going to be a removal or they even want to. But the Sons of Confederate Veterans have a lawsuit in Charlottesville to keep Robert E. Lee's statue. And I saw stuff where they had people showing up with torches. I don't know that it was
Hey,
necessarily
heritage, not hate. Everybody's used torches.
Yeah.
What are you supposed to do when the lights go out?
Okay, so this is just like a discussion on what we think, and we talked about this beforehand, so we kind of know where each one of us stand on this. But I'll let our guest.
I think we should just go this
I'll
person by
let
person.
our
like-
guest talk about what he thinks about these statues and the
I was
removal.
supposed to say,
of
during
them.
the pre-talks, I did not talk barely at all. I was just like
Just
kinda
absorbing
saying-
information.
He listened
I
to
think
our
it's like one
he
of the
listened
first
to
things
our
you guys started
tense
talking about, and I was
conversation
like, oh my
as we lowly yelled at each other over the topic. But okay, go ahead. Just go ahead. I mean, you don't have to go long-winded if you don't have
right.
huge opinion.
It's no, I mean my opinion is it's fairly simple. Is like if the purpose of the statue, like for instance Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee, we all know, is tied back to the Civil War and fighting for the South and everything else. So a statue like that is purely based on that is pretty easy to just say, I think we could take it down. It's not that big of a deal. It's a fucking statue. Excuse my French, sorry, Mom. But,
Your mom doesn't
it's
listen
just-
to this.
She doesn't listen.
She probably won't get this far.
Not at all. But I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think like if we take down some statues are old. Like a lot of them are, they were put in a long time ago. Some of them more recent than others, obviously. But if it's like purely Confederate in, Confederate states in nature per se, like just take it down. Who cares? But some of the ones that we talked about in the pre-talks was like some statues of people who may have been involved in that kind of thing, but really they were known for other things too. So that kind of gets hazy. But I think it's things like Robert E. Lee. Like I can honestly, I can't give you a good reason why we should just keep it up. Like yeah, it's history. Like it's the same thing with the Confederate flag. Like there is a lot of people like to say it's racist, but it's like a Southern pride thing. Supposedly, being proud to be part of the Confederate States, but that doesn't exist. It's not a thing. I don't know why. Why is this a big deal?
I'm glad you brought up the Confederate flag because they do like to say that it's a Southern pride and heritage thing, but largely this Confederate flag wasn't prominent in the South until we had issues.
It was one of many, many, many battle flags. Yeah.
Right.
It was but it didn't take its prominent role until we had the Civil Rights Movement, to where it is now, where they try to claim it's this the rebel flag. It's the symbol of our heritage. It didn't have that prominent role. It wasn't like they had the Confederate flag and it's been very prominent since then. It kind of came back and all of a sudden it was a symbol for them that they're trying to claim is way more important than I really think it is.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I agree with Brandon on this. I mean, some of the statues in New Orleans, the Liberty Place Monument, what it commemorated is, I don't understand why that was ever put up. I mean, unless it was something condemning the attack by these supremacists, I don't understand why it was there.
What was it? What was it?
It was commemorating an attack by white supremacists on the city's integrated police force.
Why did they have that?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, the mayor of New Orleans had that. I told you about that speech earlier where, I mean, he said these statues were put up to remind people. I mean, New Orleans has a large African American population. It was to remind them who was in charge here. Even though they had lost the war, they had to know who was in charge. I don't think any of us disagree with why these statues were put up. We may just disagree with the actual removal of them.
Yeah. So, I find the Battle of Liberty Place to be fascinating, because for me this is so I guess I should preface that. I mean, you all know this. History is very important to me. I guess a weird fact about me: my dad's a Civil War reenactor, or he used to be once upon a time.
Nice.
We spent a lot of time.
Statistically, that's gonna
Your
be
dad's
the
gonna
same
be
as in
so
Virginia.
Statistically,
mad at
100% of my dads love the Civil War. But we spent a lot of time going around to the battlefields and things like that. And James Longstreet is one of my absolute favorite people in history. And it's funny how I said if any man deserves a monument from the Civil War, it's James Longstreet. And that Battle of Liberty Place is the one that James Longstreet, I think he was a lieutenant general in the Confederacy, led an all-black militia against the white supremacist group that was trying to take over the city. So I just think it's ironic. I'm not making a point out of it. I just think it is absolutely ironic that a man who when I've had this conversation on numerous occasions, have said this man deserves a monument. There is not a monument to him, but there is a monument to the battle that he tried to stop because he didn't want white supremacists taking control of the city. I just think it's hilarious.
Yeah, that's my main gripe is most of these statues are not put in place in commemoration of acts like that were clearly against the cause that the Civil War had. Even, I mean, it was post-Civil War. They're Civil War memorials that are there for a very specific reason that everyone knows. And I understand what you're saying, and I mean that's going to be the argument.
No, I'm honestly not making a point with it. I just think it's really ironic.
Well, I'm mainly just discussing the point I know you have, which is like, I mean, these are historical references that shouldn't be removed just because they are offending people.
I think I do want to draw a distinction between monuments to people versus a monument to something like the Battle of Liberty Place. Now, all of these statues were erected, at least with regards to Louisiana. I'm sure in Virginia as well. A lot of these statues were erected with a huge amount of racial animus. They were, as Jeff rightly said, trying to remind people who was in charge. And if the situation, if we had our current awareness now and could go back in time and say whether or not we support it, I would say no, I don't support them. I don't want them to go up. And the Battle of Liberty Place Monument, I feel kind of iffy about. I don't like the removal of any elements of history, just personally, be they controversial or universally accepted as good. I don't like it. I don't think we know enough history in modernity. I think we need to understand history better, especially as something as complicated and as horrible and as existentially shattering as the Civil War. While there was a huge amount of racial animus, the fact that the statues even exist in and of themselves is an effort to establish white supremacy. I think that to say the very least, the symbol has taken on a new meaning for most people. I mean, so I was raised around Confederate flags constantly. I'm from a very rural part of Virginia with a lot of rednecks. And a lot of I think where I'm from is split about 50-50 black to white. And a lot of the black folks where I lived also wore rebel flag, or had paraphernalia with Confederate flags on it. And I think this speaks a little bit in an anecdotal way to the shift in what a symbol means with time. I had stuff that had rebel flags on it, and I just didn't think anything of it. It was just there. It was just part of being from the South. That's all it was to us. So then you learn more about it, and you have to ask yourself, am I comfortable with displaying this? How do I feel about it? How will it be perceived by others versus what does it actually mean to me?
Right.
But one of the other reasons I'm iffy about them being taken down is that I think it's going to activate a nascent part of the population that's going to feel that they're being put upon. They're going to cry political correctness. They're going to cry you're rewriting history. They're going to decry multiculturalism and things like that. And which they've already done. The KKK is showing up in Charlottesville, which is really frustrating. I like Charlottesville. It's a great place, and it's super frustrating that idiots are showing up and being racist in bed sheets. I don't like that.
I mean, there's plenty of racism in Charlottesville. They just aren't blatant about it. It's there.
Yeah.
The KKK showing up isn't doing anything to change that in one way or the other. But yeah. I get what you're saying. Like, I agree that, I mean, that's what they're gonna say. But it's not rewriting history, and I know that I'm not taking that as a stand. Like, how dare you say that? But
yeah.
I mean, they're still going to learn about the Civil War in history, like in their classrooms, in school, through educative purposes. Like the statue was there to represent a symbol, and you're right. When you walk by it, or I walk by a Robert E. Lee statue, I'm not thinking, "Wow, that is terrible." But as white males, we don't think like that in general because it doesn't affect us the same way it would affect someone else. I don't believe they should be destroyed. I don't think they should be torn down and thrown away. But we have Civil War battlegrounds and reenactments and museums and places where they keep up plantations for people to go see what it was like. I believe they should be kept there where history is preserved instead of in the middle of a city. I mean,
yeah,
I get it's being kind of sensitive, but yeah. I don't agree that they should be there. In the same token, it doesn't affect me, but I can understand. You see an African American walking down the street going, "Wow, I mean, there's Jefferson Davis. For some reason, he's got a nice little statue in the middle of town. I don't understand why that's there."
I mean, I think that what you propose is a fair compromise between the points that Brandon and I make of their removal versus their staying, and they may in fact at a Civil War battleground be in a much better historical context to be understood. I am a bit of a hardliner on just the Confederate soldier in and of itself. Outside of the place where we all went to college, for those of you that don't know, there's a statue of a generic Confederate soldier. They have one at the courthouse in Leesburg, not too far from where I live, and I view those as very different than monuments to individual people. For me, those are people that were involved in a war that is way above and beyond them. I think those are a little bit different. Like, I hate Jefferson Davis. I don't want a monument to Jefferson Davis. I think when I see people like that are super excited about monuments to Jefferson Davis, I'm like, you're dumb. You better be a history professor focusing on the Civil War, or you're dumb. But people like James Longstreet, again, one of my favorite people in history. Yeah, I don't see a problem with that. But I sorry, my computer dinged and it totally ruined my train of thought.
The generic soldier statue.
Yeah, I was touching on that. I would, in my version of compromise, in my perfect world, even though I'm not a huge fan of government spending, I believe that history is a very important thing, and I think that we have a tendency, especially with distance between yourself and something so big, to oversimplify. And if you talk to people, it's what was the Civil War about? Slavery. That's it. Cool. Thanks. Good guys, bad guys. It's an incredibly complicated event in which slavery played a significant role. Certainly, 100%. Anyone that said that slavery has no involvement in the Civil War is equally stupid. But I would rather see monuments go up almost as a point counterpoint to it. I don't want the monument to go away because I think it bows to discomfort, and I think we could lose a sense of history. Having a counter monument put up, or monuments itself. It's Monument Avenue. It goes for a while. They can probably fit some more on there. I think a great example of this is I was listening to the podcast Backstory, and they were asking one of the professors on there about a monument to Woodrow Wilson. I think it's at Yale or Princeton. I can't remember. And, Woodrow Wilson was a blatantly, horribly racist person. And they asked the professor, should we take the monument down? The professor's a black guy. And he said, no, you shouldn't take it down. He's like, I understand why. He's like, you have good heart in wanting to take it down because he's a horribly racist person. He's like, but it's been there. It's part of history now. And it's not going to change what happened by removing it. Why not instead put up a memorial to the occupation of Haiti that was done, under Wilson or something like that as a counterpoint to it, which I kind of appreciate.
Yeah, see, I could get that too. If they wanted to put up a counter monument.
Like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, people like that.
What in the world is going on?
There's construction at my house, and I got a Jack Russell that's mad about everything.
I was like, who is...
Do you live in Detroit? What the hell's happening?
It sounds like
Look, I'm in a house. I'm not in Detroit, Brandon.
It sounds like...
I'm on a podcast from the streets of Detroit. All right,
through the microphone, all we're getting, it sounds like somebody's beating a wire screen door with a flip flop. That's what it sounds like. Just like...
That is eerily accurate. That is eerily accurate. I was like, that's it. There's no other way to describe that sound.
So it's funny when these start to run a little bit long, Laura will, like my wife will sometimes like walk through, and like when we start, she'll like be very sensitive with the doors and kind of tiptoe through. Like when we're hitting it's done, she'll like slam the doors open and boom, 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 like stomp through. And I could just imagine her outside with a flip flop, like slapping on the door, like it's time.
Jesus.
I can picture that too. That's actually the person I pictured doing it. That's why I was like, what is going on? Anyway,
why are you slapping that door with a flip flop? I don't have time to explain.
Yeah, I could be for. I could be for a counter monument of some sort. I mean, I don't know. I don't.
I think there are other stories.
I don't
also like. What about the people who? I think there were a number of people that were dragged into the Confederate army that didn't have a choice. People that were roped into it because of where they lived, and if they didn't enjoy it, it was either join or die.
Yeah, there are plenty of stories that can be memorialized far better. I definitely believe that. I mean, there's a huge contrast in monuments on the Civil War that don't pertain to slavery at all. Not that the Civil War was all about slavery, but it's largely ignored. Didn't we just get a museum focused on it recently?
There's one in Appomattox.
But didn't that just open recently, or am I thinking of something else?
This opened back when I was still living down there, so we may have gotten a new one. But it's interesting. I mean, you talk about people being forced into a particular side of the war based off the fact of where they lived, and moving to Northern Virginia has been fascinating. We're so close to Ball's Bluff. We're so close to Antietam. And there, you learn a lot about the history. Mosby, with Mosby's Raiders, is a very prominent figure up here because he was from Loudon in the area that I live now. And it's fascinating going into Southern Maryland and being in Northern Virginia. Northern Virginia had a lot of Union sympathizers. Southern Maryland had a lot of Confederate sympathizers. In West Virginia, because we're on this little group where you can jump from one to the next in 10 seconds, but I guess that's how land borders work.
You guess?
There's a lot of Confederate flags. There's a lot of Confederate flags in West Virginia, which I always find to be the weirdest thing. I'm like, you exist because of that. Or I hope you fly that flag ironically, but
right. Oh yeah. But I mean, that's the thing is. The Confederate flag was largely out of the picture for a long period of time and came back in for racially motivated purposes. So that's
the symbol was reconstituted to mean something else. Yeah.
Right. That's why people that try to fly it and say it's about heritage and Southern culture, it's not. It's not. It lost that meaning a long time ago. And you're either lying or you're that ignorant to the matter. It's just to me that's that cut and dry. And you can argue to your blue in the face, you're not going to change my mind. Not you. I'm talking about talking to the audience, because that was
the royal you.
Yeah.
My thing is, as long as it's my my point of bringing up the Confederate flag is like it shouldn't be flown by any government agency. Like,
Oh yeah,
Right. That's
Like
what I'm
but-
referring to in general, anyway.
Yeah. Right.
We'll-
so,
you're
that's-
allowed to fly
if you
whatever you
wanna
want.
claim, because going back to kind of Kramer was saying earlier, he said, he just grew up with it, and it didn't mean anything. It just meant Southern pride, and like those people do have that thought process that it means like a culture and heritage based only on them growing up in the South. It has nothing to do with where they came from or whatever, but that's the way they look at it. So I don't care if they want to fucking play with it or if they want to put it on their hats.
Well, my gripe is
roll some coal out there.
my gripe is that's why I said you're either ignorant to what it means, or you're lying, and that's a lot of times they are. I mean, they're lying.
Yeah.
They're saying it's not about racism, but they're the first ones.
Don't
that are sitting
underestimate people's stupidity.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, because I know a lot of these people. Like, I live in Southern Virginia, and you hear them say, like, oh, it's not about race.
I'm in
and
Florida
then
right now.
they're screaming the N-word.
How many gators attacked you this week?
Yeah, I mean, they get a Budweiser in them, and they're screaming the N-word. Like, you can fly the Confederate flag. That is...
Okay, it's a little... I'm just kidding. You're right.
I think you're stereotyping racist, Jeff.
Yeah.
Sometimes they attack other ethnic groups.
You're right. Arabs, Asians, they attack them
You
all.
seem to know a
with,
lot about the Met.
Yeah, I've been around, and you sit there, you're like, I can't believe I'm here. I need to leave. And I can't leave because they're going to know exactly why I'm leaving. But,
Oh,
yeah,
I start
mean,
talking about white supremacy, and suddenly you gotta go. What's up with that, huh?
But yeah, I mean, but I don't know. That's just the thing. I just don't believe that anybody is that ignorant. They know exactly what it is. I mean, I don't know. I've seen it.
I predict the next battle that we're gonna fight is gonna be over states of the South whose state flags have the Confederate flag in them. Because I think Alabama and Mississippi, there's a couple that have the Confederate flag within the state itself, and I think that's going to be the next fight, to change some state flags, which is an interesting conversation and warrants discussion.
Well, once they remove all the statues, they'll have nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
They're like, oh shit, your flags.
I think, if they start talking about like making it like outlawing the Confederate flag being flown on private property, I can understand a government building.
I don't think it should be flown in any state facility at all. But
Yeah.
No, yeah.
private property is private property.
Yeah, private property, private business. That's their choice. I will never do that. You can. I mean, and if they decide to take down a statue of Robert E. Lee and somebody down the street wants to buy it and put it in their front yard, that is their choice. Now, if they're in a homeowners association, there might be an issue. But but yeah, I mean,
Sir, two problems. Your mailbox is the wrong color, and there's a 15-foot statue of a Confederate general
also,
in your
if you
front
don't
yard.
trim those weeds, we are going to fine you. It's going to.
Swear to God, Mr. Johnson.
But yeah,
I've learned so much about HOAs being up here, and just
see, this is why we
Dude, there's
discuss. This is why we discuss things beforehand. It makes the topic, it makes the conversation far more civil. But yeah, I think we all, well, I don't know if we all disagree, but I think we disagree. But
we all have different views on how it should be handled. you know?
Yeah.
I personally, the best solution for this would be for them to be removed and taken to historical landmarks and stuff like that. The problem is Virginia has a law in place that you cannot remove war memorials, so they would have to be reclassified as something other than a war memorial, and that's a whole nother battle. So I don't see it happening here. I don't even know why there's a lawsuit in Charlottesville, to be quite honest with you, but there is.
I think they're doing one of my favorite phrases, solution without a problem. It's not a problem here in Virginia yet, but we're going to come up with a solution to it right now. Because it is a problem somewhere else, and I think that it has spurred a very interesting conversation that needs to happen about what role do we let these memorials play in our lives, memorials as a whole. How important was the Civil War? But the negative side of that is it has gotten every armchair historian up. And I almost said every armchair constituent, but it'd be weird to reference the name of the podcast on the show.
He said the thing. Okay, so yeah, and that's the thing I have too is
Like hearing the title of the movie.
I get what you're saying. And we talk about it before. Like you're not free speech doesn't mean free speech for anything that doesn't offend you. We say that but it's one of those things like how much do we want them to ignore? Like, well, I know he was kind of a Confederate general that fought essentially to keep slavery, but just ignore it. You know what I mean? And I'm agitating on purpose. But that, I mean, that's it's kind of hard to say that because it's
Got to
just
get those hate listens.
very insensitive and very
Too easy.
yeah. It's just like you just ignore it. Just ignore it, okay? I mean, we put up a couple
Mind
black
their own fucking
statues.
business.
We put up a couple statues of black people. Just you got yours, we got ours, right? It's good. It's good. It's just it's hazy.
I voted for Obama. Okay, what more do you want?
Jeez.
All right.
I have a friend at work who's gay. What more do you want from me?
Oh,
Makes
God.
lovely cupcakes. Anyways, so on to the next thing, probably.
Yeah. So I want to approach our last topic
No, it's not
differently
our
than we
last
did
topic.
Yeah,
It's
we
not
have,
last topic.
we have 2 left. Are we doing 2?
Yeah.
Well, Twit's not even a topic. That's just like.
Well, we
look at
still
this weird
have the
stuff.
stuff
No.
with the police, and then we have.
Oh man, I totally forgot about that one. Good God.
Well,
All right, let's hit it.
we're like an hour and 20 in, so we're good. We have 40 minutes to get through this, and still be.
Jesus.
You're all right. You're all right, Brandon. Just
My ass is going to sleep.
all
I
right.
am sweating.
Okay, so the general topic here. I'm not gonna say what I have because that's just sensationalized. But we're gonna talk about this.
big of you.
Say what?
That's big of you.
I know.
Sensationalized. It's true. It is.
So this week, this was this week. The other one I believe was last week. But in Bakersfield, California, 19-year-old girl, Tatiana, I believe that's what we agreed on, Hargrove. Somehow she was mistaken for a suspect that police were searching for in an assault case. I had it in there, but I can't remember. I believe they said he was wielding a machete at the time.
I think that's what I heard too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were looking for a 160 pound, 5'10" black male with a goatee and a shaved head. So Tatiana is 5'2", 120-ish pounds. She was on a bicycle. Looks nothing like a male. They apprehended her. Tried to pull her off her bike, and in the process, they claim she shoulder checked them to the ground. So they punched her in the face and pinned her to the ground, and then took her to the hospital. And because she got punched in the face by a full-grown man, and to cover their own ass, they said the hospital also thought she was a male at first, because that makes it okay to just assault people that you deem worthy of that.
Well, the facial swelling from being assaulted probably helped them
Yeah,
be not able to identify her.
She got punched in one side of the face. That doesn't make you all of a sudden look male.
I was just being facetious, but okay.
I'm fighting your argument. But no,
Fine,
okay,
like,
so
it's just hard-coded to do
Bakerfield's
that.
police department is currently under a federal probe because back in December they stopped 2 college students and beat one of them. I don't know how bad they beat them or beat one of these college students, but they're under probe for that. So this is not going to help it. And we're not going to... The discussion isn't really on this, as it is just this growing thing of police officers just seeming to resort to violence immediately. We have the incident in Minnesota where a police officer was responding to a burglary alarm at a residence, jumped the back fence where 2 dogs were, and proceeded to pull his gun and shoot both of them. He then later claimed that he feared for his life, and these dogs were aggressive. Even though he was caught on camera, the dogs were not. They didn't seem aggressive. They didn't seem to be charging him, and he feared for his life so much that he had the time to pick up his shells and jump the fence to get it before he left. I guess the thing I want to talk about is, like, I mean, I don't know if either one of these anything's come down, but we've talked about the Philando Castile as well as a couple other shootings. This like growing trend where police officers, I guess it's a training situation. I want Brandon in on this because we've already circle jerked about this enough. But what is, like, I mean, what is what is it that's going on?
I do have a little bit to offer.
Good.
So,
that's what I was going.
I was gonna say. So, I am in the military. I'm in the Marine Corps. We all go through the same basic training. So, like, I have a little bit of training via the military, and we're talking about the pseudo-military organizations such as the police force. And then on top of that, I have connections here in Escambia County, Florida, with people or the ex-chief of police, and then also my father was a police officer. I grew up in the police
Right.
culture per se. So really, all it boils down to, honestly, is fear. There's not a lot of training in the law enforcement realm on the ethics of some of the actions that they take. A lot of it is basic procedural training, but not a lot of ethical and emotional training. So and that's kind of one of the things that makes a big difference between us and, the military and a pseudo-military organization such as a police force. We go through extensive training on noticing the differences between, enemies and friendlies and things like that. And a lot of the time, a lot of police law enforcement training is all procedural. This is what you do if this happens. Very logical. What's the next step? What's the next paperwork that you have to do for this kind of situation? And you could argue that there's not a lot of funding in law enforcement training for them to have that kind of to extend that law enforcement training. And so what happens is you have it's the thin blue line culture. It's the culture based on watching your brother's back. And I can tell you, in the military, there's 100% a bond between the people, your guy on your left and your right, as cliche as that sounds. It's like it is a fraternity of men and women who come together for the common purpose and blah, blah, blah. But it's the same thing in a pseudo-military organization, but unfortunately it's not backed up with the same training that the military gets. So then you have this thin blue line culture where everybody watches their brother's back and nobody reports each other. So you run into this, they call it the blue wall of silence. It's the I'm not going to report my buddy because he's my brother and my buddy. And so what happens is the hothead cops, they do things like the official term is excessive force. They use excessive force and they don't get reported because of their buddy. But so the hotheads will do it for power and kind of like establish that power, not only in front of the civilians that they're doing it to, or they're doing it in front of, but they're also doing it in front of their fellow cops. So the cop knows, oh, that guy's a hard ass. He's really good. He's a good cop. And so they establish that political power within the pseudo-military organization, and then it never gets recorded. And so that's just what happens. And so now you have all these hotheads running around. Recently, we've been able to uncover a lot of truly bad cops by going through cell phone communications. So if an investigation comes up, the leader of the law enforcement will reach down, they'll subpoena the phone of the cop in question, and look at the messages and emails and things like that, and they'll truly see, okay, this guy's, he's bragging about it, he's talking about it with his buddies, oh yeah, I totally shot that guy because he whatever. And it just kind of makes it apparent. But it's really hard to do that legally for a lot of cops, and unfortunately, because of that thin blue line culture and that blue wall of silence, like these kind of things will keep going on. So there's an argument that the media only shows the excessive force part of whatever happens. There are other things that come into play, like criminal background, the nature of the call that they're going to, the availability of backup, so like knowing where their buddies are, and if they know all their buddies are way off and there's no possibility of backup, it goes back to what I said before. It boils down to fear. And it's these rookie guys, and sometimes older guys who are very quick to let the fear overcome them, so that they look over all the ethical and everything else, and they just kind of act on instinct.
Yeah, this is why I wanted to talk about this, because I knew your background with your family and you being in the military. So yeah, this fear. See, the way I look at it, and it's fairly aggressive, is you shouldn't take a job like this if you're not at least somewhat prepared. And like you said, there's a lack of training to a certain extent in the emotional side to understand the dangers and cope with the dangers. But it's not something you shouldn't take a job as a police officer if you can't handle it. And when you're shown to not be able to handle it, they're not reporting it, and that's where these body cams come in. But it seems like every time something happens, like in Bakersfield, they didn't have body cams. So and in Minnesota, the only reason that the cop was caught on camera was because the family had cameras in their yard. Otherwise, his story was that dogs charged him as soon as he jumped the fence, and he feared for his life, and it was bullshit. The dogs came and were like wagging their tail and looking at him, and he pulls his gun and just shoots. But I know we're talking about dogs here, not people. But I mean, this can still be taken to the next level, like we've seen with Philando Castile, where the cop pulled his gun as soon as the guy told him, "I have a gun." He pulled his gun and said, "Don't touch it," and then they shot him immediately. It's disheartening. It puts a definite tarnish on the police force in general because you see these guys, especially in today's media, where it can be released as soon as it happens. Like, it tarnishes the reputation of police officers as a whole. They're not all bad. For the vast majority of them are good. But
right, and that's kind of like the mentality that I've always had, because I mean, obviously biased towards my own father, but like my dad, you know, he always told me about the bad cops. He knew who the bad cops were and why they were bad.
I've met your father. The personality he has, you always hear about the good cops. They're personable. Yeah. They try to connect with people instead of constantly looming the badge over top of them. It doesn't mean that they're...
A lot of them use the badge as, you know, they use the shield per se as a literal shield. They go into these situations like hiding behind their own badge, and then when the situation happens, they blame it on, oh, well, they were doing this. You know, it was very reactive, you know, but then these cases come up where they have body cams and stuff, and it shows otherwise.
Right. And Kramer's worked in this field too, and he's talked about stories about, I don't know if you've talked about bad cops, but you've definitely talked about stuff that they do. Like the training's in place. It may not be implemented properly or universally, but I think body cams have shown so far to de-escalate these situations, if anything, because the cop knows that they're being recorded, so they act differently. Which is fine. You can be a bad person as long as you're doing your job, even if it's just because you know they're watching.
Right.
Yeah. I when I was a dispatcher, I spent 3 years doing that. I come from a very poor area. Like, buying a new cruiser is a huge deal. We can't afford body cam. And I had one officer that I worked with went out and bought his own so that he could do it. And he said, he's like, everything I do is I go to a traffic stop, I go to a noise complaint, everything is always recorded, and it keeps me responsible. And because he's like, everyone goes into any situation trying to do their best. I'm going to be as calm and level-headed. He's like, but this is a reminder for me, and it's also a reminder for them, because when someone knows they're being filmed, that sense of anonymity that you have if something's not being documented is certainly gone. And I think body cams are a very important tool. And I mean, I worked with bad cops too. I worked with cops that were not exactly reputable, in my opinion, that did inappropriate things. But you're both correct, and Jeff, very much so. In this circumstance, the best cops are the ones that they had a relationship with people. I did a ride along with a cop that I was friends with during my last couple months as a dispatcher. And we went to domestic disputes, husband and wife arguing. We went all around the county doing stuff. I don't know. I rode with him till about 3 or 4 in the morning, and it was the way that he dealt with it. It was like, look, I'm here. I live just down the road. I'm, so and so. You know me. Let's talk. What's going on? And it wasn't trained de-escalation, but it was default de-escalation. He isn't going in there and he's like, oh yeah, I remember in the course we did this. It's just like, look, everybody needs to relax. We need to talk. Why don't we talk this out? There's no need for y'all to be fighting. In Minnesota, they started putting some officers through de-escalation training. And one of the things that cops have to deal with, it's unfortunate, is TDOs, temporary detention orders, or ECOs, emergency containment orders, for people that might be having a mental episode, something like that. And you're basically detained for up to 24 hours so that you can get help. And in Minnesota, when they encountered someone who previously they would have had to do a TDO for, officers would just be like, all right, get in the cruiser, go. And they didn't engage with them. But they went through de-escalation training and they learned to talk a little bit. And again, this is just anecdotal. I heard it on NPR. It's very interesting. And they aren't arresting these people nearly as much. They're able to talk with them, find out that they're okay, things like that. And it's and not potentially cause a situation that wasn't going to be violent and make it go violent by doing like what Brandon said and overreacting out
And
of
now,
fear.
and Brandon brought it up that I mean, and you just said it too. They're not. A lot of departments aren't doing this de-escalation training. They're not doing this emotional side of the training, emotional side of the job. Like, and there's programs out there to get these body cams, but I mean, there's catches and all kinds of stuff. We don't need to get into that. But yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is they need to emotionally prepare these people for the job that they're going to do. They're dealing with people in highly emotional and tense and tough situations. Your first reaction shouldn't be to pull your gun. It's
Right.
just
And
it's just
another
too
problem-
dangerous to do that.
Another problem that we run into is you can put all the training into place, but I know this because I so kind of comparing pseudo military to military. I have a lot of senior Marines under me who, if you were to tell them that they had a new training thing that they had to go through, they'd go through it very reluctantly and wouldn't give a shit. They wouldn't retain anything that you show them. And it's kind of the same thing within the law enforcement community. You have these, it's really easy to implement new training programs and train these new guys, but then you still have those older guys that have been there forever. The young guys are looking up to them, and they're the ones, being assholes. So it's
Right.
hard to like train that out of the older guys. So it's almost a situation where we had like let the old guys retire, get them all out of there, and then like you really
Well, you
hit
gotta-
hard in the
you
initial
gotta-
training so that
You got
they
to
know
implement it.
better.
Yeah. Well, no, yeah, and I understand that. So I guess
Yeah,
mean,
it's
here
the
it is
Kuhnian
now,
paradigm shift.
trying
is-
to
is-
fix a problem with our limited knowledge. But so you have to wait for these guys to retire out. You still implement the training, the cameras,
Right.
and then you can start holding people responsible. And this is where you hit that blue wall where they're not telling on each other, so we have to then catch them, and then
Yep.
you get. I mean, it's difficult, but it's something that needs to be done because you hear about them too often, and maybe it is the media choosing to cover it. The media also covers when cops do something good, like they adopt an abandoned baby or save a child or a person. Like there's
Yeah, that's
plenty
not
of
popular right now.
no, it's not popular because it doesn't get people up in arms.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I mean, when you see a police officer open fire on a guy sitting in a car with his girlfriend and child, and he claims he feared for his life and he feared for the life of the child as he unloads 6 rounds into the vehicle where the child is sitting, and then gets off, I can't just sit there and go, well, it's just one bad apple.
Yeah. So this, I want to ask you. So to use an analogy because it's my favorite thing.
Yay.
So one of the arguments that anti-vaxxers use about why you shouldn't give your kids vaccines is that at the same time that we instituted vaccines for the public schools, autism rates started to rise, and they'll point to this. And we and it's not. I mean, obviously, it's not actually the case. It's the fact that as we started to fund autism research better, we got better at diagnosing it, and we also expanded what it meant to be autistic. So it's not that the number of autistic people changed, it's that we were able to see it more. So our perception changed. And part of me wonders if we aren't having something comparable with police violence. Maybe the violence rates are staying the same, potentially declining, but it's because we now have tools in place to see the evidence and make and have actionable responses to it, that we are perceiving it as more simply because we are able to see it more because we are putting the steps in place so that it stops.
Oh, I mean, that's certainly possible, and I could lean that direction easily. It's more. I mean, you don't see body cams.
It's a more generous reading, but
I mean, you don't see body cams implemented everywhere, and these
yeah.
this training's not being implemented everywhere. And I mean, they don't have. I mean, they have internal affairs investigation in these police departments, but they're largely viewed as outsiders. I know that because I watched police dramas. But
I watched
I watched The
CSI
Wire.
but yeah, I mean,
one.
yeah, I could look at that and say maybe
Love Idris Elba.
we're moving in a direction, but it's hard to trust that completely when you see these cops, even when they go to trial, are acquitted or found not guilty. Some cases not even fired, and when they are, they're given large severance packages, and it's just
It's like when the Catholic Church shuffles priests around.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
Similar.
But yeah. I mean, like I said, there's no right answer. I think we all kind of agree. Like I said, this is a little circle jerk, but I wanted to talk about some stuff that I feel like we could all speak on. So, but the last one, this is where the fun begins. We're going to talk about net neutrality. What, you want to go back to?
I want to go about this one slightly differently, just a little bit differently than we have before for the rest of these. And I guess for the edification of the listener at home, mom and dad, those are the two people on my end that listen. When we were doing the pre-show about this, Jeff and I have talked about net neutrality and argue before, and Jeff did a lot more research into this than I did. And I will fully admit, especially after doing our pre-show conversation, I don't know as much as both Brandon and Jeff do on this topic. From the last show, I consider myself skeptical about the idea. I don't generally like the idea of the internet being entitled to, but we had a good pre-show conversation, and I think the way that I'd like to go about this is, if we're cool with it, probably should have talked about it in pre-show if we're going to bring that up, but maybe going through and almost doing like we did during the pre-show, but a little more calm and
Less gunny.
less of listen here, you stupid fucking shit, and I'm more like, oh, good point. But no, do it as like, look, me as a skeptical person, saying, as a skeptical person, how do you respond to this? Why do you think this is better? Because I feel like that might actually be a better conversation than me going, I just don't like the government and the internet, because it won't go anywhere if that's all we do.
Yeah.
Very well.
I kind of zoned out because I got a message and I came back in as you were like, stupid fucking shit. I was like, what is going on?
How'd you know?
I'm sure your mom is going to enjoy this little tangent we're having.
So
but
mad.
I know.
Okay, so should we just lay this?
Why don't I start as the skeptical person, as the one that says, I feel iffy about it. So, and y'all can address my concerns. I'll just kind of ask questions from there on out. So the thing I feel, I should say, one reason I'm not hugely wound up about net neutrality, or with regards to the internet being classified as a utility, is I do have concerns, and not in a tinfoil hat way, of potential for governmental regulation, or over-regulation, I should say. But one of the other big things that I hear consistently from people is that you'll be charged more. And for me, just as an individual, being charged more for me is not a good argument. As a private business, they can charge me more, whatever. I don't need the internet to survive, And so I view it as, well, great, if they want to charge me, that's awesome. The internet is very much, in my view, a luxury of the 21st century that I don't need to survive. And as a result, if they want to charge me more for it, that just doesn't bother me. And if it becomes unconscionable to me, I'll just go, well, screw it. I just won't have the internet.
Okay. And my argument.
The Amish do it.
There's like
great.
a long silence, and it was just okay.
Well, I was soaking it all in, because I mean, I guess the internet is a luxury. But it is used in a lot of schools for educational purposes now. It's used for communication. You can argue it's a luxury.
Everything.
I'm not gonna be like, well, I mean, people use it for banking. There's a lot of things that are digital now that if you just
Well, I mean, let me
make the
rephrase.
internet- I know, because I know what you're
think
saying. I'm not gonna make this a hard stand. I'm just prefacing the argument.
Yeah.
So the argument for net neutrality isn't that they'll charge more. My problem is that they will then be allowed to choose, because you have these ISPs that are now in the streaming business, they're selling services that stream media while also allowing other streaming services to use their infrastructure. So now they get to choose Netflix, and this isn't going to affect Netflix like it will, but Netflix can afford to pay it. It's going to affect the next guy, the little guy that comes in to try to start a business that may be better, but they lose because they can't afford to pay for the fast lane, and nobody's watching The Office on your shitty connection that lags out and buffers and sputters every other frame. There's not going to do it. So you're getting rid. People want free market, and they see this as a regulation, which it is, but you want free market, but then you want the ISPs to run the market while also running the infrastructure that allows the market to exist.
It would be completely different if the internet service providers were not also providing the content.
I wonder if this brings up questions of we mentioned in the pre-show the Time Warner Comcast merger, and it was really funny listening to NPR. They had a slightly more opinionated host on, and they said the Trump administration is thinking about blocking their merger. They're talking about it because they're mad at because Comcast owns NBC, and he was like, they're mad at them because they own it, and I'm like, well, it sounds like something you should be happy about, NPR, that they would look at potentially blocking the merger, but I guess it's the Trump administration, so it's bad if they do it.
No, they
whatever.
have to find a petty reason for why it's happening. They've been talking about blocking the Time Warner Comcast merger well before Trump was in office. So
yeah, so I mean, it does, for me, I guess, ask questions about, I guess, vertical integration or monopolies if they are providing the streaming services. Do you think that there are other routes by which to achieve a little more independence and make it easier for smaller people? I know that Jeff and I had bandied about the idea last time of having the infrastructure as a public infrastructure upon which different ISPs ISPs can use the infrastructure, but the infrastructure itself is public.
Right, and there are places in the United States that have that, and they've gone.
I think Austin did it.
And they had to go through years of litigation to get that passed because the ISPs did not want it. I believe it's somewhere in Washington too, and then you have people like Google Fiber who will come in, but they sell cheaper internet by having the local government help fund the building of the infrastructure, so it's a joint venture. And they can't come everywhere because they leave it up to the city or county or state. It's usually at a more local level, so city or county has to pass the measures so that they can come in. And they're Verizon and AT&T and Comcast. They're not. I mean, they're fighting it tooth and nail, just like they fought net neutrality rules when they were still classified as Title I. That's the whole reason it's Title II now. And I know we've talked about that, but they don't want this for a reason. They claim to want net neutrality, but in Title II is stymieing their growth. But when it was Title I, they still fought net neutrality. I just don't understand where it hurts them to have a free and open internet. The only way it hurts them is because they can't charge the consumer for access to content, because even now they can charge. They can't force you to pay for bandwidth, but you can get the most bandwidth possible. Netflix pays for it, YouTube pays for it, but it would be passed on to the consumer in this scenario. That's why a lot of people, I hate those things where they're like, they're gonna make it so Netflix is choppy. Netflix isn't gonna be choppy. It's just gonna be choppy for you because you didn't pay the premium fee. That's like what it actually is. Because they all show like the tunnels, and they're like, oh, they'll shut it off. That's not how it's gonna be. Because that's not how it is now.
Now, one of the things that I consistently heard amongst people that are opposed to net neutrality, or opposed to making the internet a Title II utility, or I should say, one of the issues they had with the arguments, and Brandon touched on it when we were doing the pre-show too, is that I personally, and again, this is skepticism. In theory, I have no problem with Netflix paying for more. You know, if I've got a 5-lane highway and there's a guy driving a combine blocking up 3 lanes, and everybody's paying $1 on the toll road to be there, well, maybe that guy should pay more. I don't necessarily have an issue with that, because if everybody's paying the same price, but someone's paying the same price, or in theory paying the same price and using a lot more and slowing it down for other people, it doesn't seem unreasonable to charge a monopsony, as it were, a higher rate. Right.
The thing is, they try to play it up like their bandwidth is being affected that bad. But it's not. That's not the case. They have the ability to do these things. It's just greed. They want to be able to charge what they want, and it's getting to the point where, I mean, they like I said, they could be allowed to do that if there was another road to choose. Like if there's a guy taking up 3 lanes on a 5-lane road, you get off and you take the side street to get there. But there is no side street in this scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So now you get to pay premiums and add-ons. So you get Netflix, you pay for Netflix, and we keep using these streaming services. So you pay for that, and then you get to pay your cable provider, your internet provider, to allow you to access what you've paid for. It'd be like going to the store and you purchase a DVD and you put it in, and the production company says input your credit card information to access the content you purchased from Walmart.
Yeah. It's and I know that's one of those things that I think, well, that's shitty, but I don't think it should be, illegal. And I understand the situation is far more complicated than that, but when it's phrased in things like that, it's like, well, I don't buy DVDs and everything. But,
God damn it!
No, I think
well, I just don't do that.
If it
So
were
fuck everyone else.
Yeah, basically, duh. Look, I don't need insulin. I don't care what happens with Martin Shkreli. So.
God damn it!
Jesus.
Oh my god!
I'm not being serious. Jesus Christ, I am not.
This is the internet.
peculiar
Everything
on
you
those
said is this. Well, yeah. I mean, let's let Brandon talk a little bit because we've kind of bogarted this conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, it comes down to being able to trust big companies to do the right thing. It goes back to like the trickle down theory for like the economy. Like, oh well, if we like let the big companies save money on taxes, they'll the money will trickle down to the lower.
You hit a point of diminishing returns.
Right, but it's just not going to happen. People suck. People in charge of these companies suck. They'll pay for it. Netflix will pay Verizon what they have to pay, but guess what? That's going to go back onto the consumer. The price for Netflix is going to go up. Everything's going to go up, and it's just why.
The price for
and
Netflix went up when they put these rules into place the first time.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of like what Jeff said earlier, a lot of these companies are already paying like huge sums of money for these huge fiber networks that have to go to these giant data centers where they have like these huge supercomputers and massive servers, and so it costs a lot for the infrastructure as it is. So why impart a whole new slew of fees to these companies, and why have that be passed down to the consumer and everything? Like,
why allow
it's
it?
just so it should just be an open. Yes, the infrastructure costs money, and yes, you should probably have to pay if you're going to get like more, because there is a reason in some, I won't say a definitive reason, but there's a reason why faster internet costs more, and it's because it requires physical infrastructure that is different for the faster speeds.
Well, yeah, and here's the thing though, because
it's just
we
the
need
data itself.
We need to say it. It's because these services are paying to have access to the fastest bandwidth. That's not what the net neutrality. That's not what they're voting on. They're voting on the cable's ability to then get it both ways. So get it from Netflix, and then make a special lane that you then have to pay to access to be able to then access Netflix. That's.
I think the most convincing argument that you two have put forward for me is that of essentially a cartel of internet service providers. That's what you're dealing with.
Yes.
Okay. So, as someone who I'll call myself neutral on this. I'm generally a free marketeer kind of guy. But you put forward a solid argument as to how we've had the rise of an ISP and telecom cartels that the market will not fix on its own. And I think I get your argument a lot better than we did initially, because when a lot of the arguments that I've heard from people, and like I watched part of like the Total Biscuit video on net neutrality, I found the arguments very much lacking. And the thing that I always found lacking about them was, well, they're going to charge extra for that, or they'll prioritize data. And my feeling to that had always been, so you don't. It's, first of all, the internet isn't water, it's not food, it's not shelter. So it's either worth it to you to pay it, or it's not worth it to you to pay. That's always been my view. Voting with your wallet, as it were. But when that is reframed in the context of a cartel and collusion, and not necessarily just market control to the quality of a product, but you essentially have a cartel, and in some circumstances, the government has enabled that. That I think that is probably the strongest point, because when I hear people go, "Oh, well, they're charging a bunch of money," I'm like, "So it's business. A business is like Chivas Regal is a piece of shit liquor that they just jacked the price up on, and people started selling like crazy in the 70s. I think that's shitty, but I don't think it should be legal. So price arguments never worked for me. But when you two frame it in the way of a cartel, it works better.
Well, yeah,
I
and
think
Or
you
it works,
speak
I think
of
it works
you
pretty
speak
well.
of cartel. Let's keep in mind that Wheeler, the former head of the FCC, put these in.
Actually, so hold on. I think that Verizon is mad because I just conceded that you all made good points and you started like getting broken up and staticky.
Well, I've been on Verizon this whole time, so they hadn't shut
They're
me down
talking about
yet.
us.
And actually, I'm on a small point-to-point system that's really local to this area. It's organic.
Shut up.
I have Cox.
Oh, I'm sorry. We didn't even talk about
I got.
Cox.
I have all
That's fine,
points.
actually.
Let's the thing is, you talked about cartels. Wheeler put these rules into place, and then he was I don't want to say replaced, but I forgot the guy's name. IG, the guy that's
Ajit Pai.
yeah, he is the head of the FCC now. He is a
He worked for
former,
Verizon, didn't he?
Yeah, he's a former lawyer that worked for the lobbyists for Verizon. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh, I'm not gonna blame someone of collusion.
But it's
Use your
blatantly
eyes. Use your eyes.
obvious.
Yeah, it's blatant that it's just like he gets into power and all of a sudden they're trying to reverse everything and it's working. And people are adamantly against the reversal of these rules and they're like, well, you don't understand. We have to do it. It's just like, no, you don't. You don't have to do it. You're doing it because you were paid by these people for years and now you're returning the favor. It's
That's
it's
that's
collusion
kinda my-
at its
and
finest, and it benefits nobody. It benefits the rich business owners of these
Right.
of these
It would be
telecoms.
like I said before, it'd be completely different if like the content providers were not the same as the internet providers. You know,
and back in
they're all the
2005,
same business.
when they weren't running these streaming services, they were actually against moving from Title II to Title I, and in 10 years to 2015, that changed completely. It's complicated and interesting and frustrating, and it's something that we shouldn't be arguing about. It should just be a free and open internet. It also should be a free market where you don't have to worry about shitty things Comcast does because you can go somewhere else, but you can't. You can go to Comcast or Verizon or Comcast and Cox. Like, I think I live in an area where you can get 3 or 4 different internet services, but that's a rarity. Most places it's 1, maybe 2, and they have litigation and regulations.
I only
in
have
So
2 where
I
live.
have the exact opposite. I guess sole provider. Verizon and Comcast won't come out to where I live, so I have a point-to-point system that's got like 8 people on it.
Well, I mean,
I had Verizon and I loved it because it was super fast and stuff.
yeah, I mean,
but,
Verizon's
It's just funny.
has great service for the most part, but they do have shitty practices, and they're being kept in check by regulations, and it's just a pill you have to swallow. And people want to live in this perfect world where you don't have regulations, everybody does the right thing, and they've proven time and time again these are the same people that got the repeal passed back in March to make it so they could sell your data or your information without telling you, and leave out notices that there were breaches in their network. So they
Brought to you
don't look
by
bad.
private internet access. Wear an internet condom when you go on the internet.
But yeah, so I think that's
Hey
For
Eric,
VPN.
what's your VPN? Wow.
so. Should we,
All
should
right,
we
so do we want to bring this one to a close and find out why this week is terrible? See what I did there.
Oh yeah, this week is terrible. We're gonna leave off the second one because I just don't give a shit about that. But let's talk about the instant meme of Kellyanne Conway, who everybody saw this.
Insta-meme.
She went on Sean Hannity's show and it's to talk about the Donald Trump Jr. debacle, and she wrapped it up by saying, "This is how I see this situation so far." She holds up a piece of paper actually. It just says collusion ? Collusion with it crossed out, and she says it's actually an illusion and a delusion. And she's like grinning like she was so clever. And she's like, we just want to thank Don Jr. for releasing his emails, as if he didn't do it as he was about to get outed by the fucking Washington Post. It's just, they stop letting this woman go on TV. Just stop. She's this fucking idiot. But to sit there and hold up two people, like, nobody cleared that. She just printed that out, and it was with her, and she's like, I'm gonna be so clever. They're gonna love me on Twitter.
I'm gonna be an internet meme, and I'm gonna get all over the Donald.
Please stop! I want to die.
Oh, actually, I've got a one for like I guess it would be this week isn't that bad. I have 1 point for that. If that's a thing we're doing.
Well, that's not a thing, but I'm gonna let it happen, I guess.
All right. Like, I know I'm going rogue here.
Oh God.
So Oregon passed some legislation to defelonize possession of cocaine and heroin. So I'm a huge advocate for the legalization of all drugs, because I think there's enough studies that indicate that leads to reduced violence, especially amongst cartels. I mean, legalizing weed in America has done a lot to reduce cartel violence, but or at least drop the murder rate a whole bunch. But when you treat drug issues, drug addiction, like a public health issue, and you don't imprison people for it, they generally leads to a more productive and better society, in my view. But they took that step, so it's not fully legal, but it has been defelonized. So if you get found with it, I guess you'll only go to jail for a little bit.
Baby steps.
Cool.
For the sake of not keeping this going.
Did I just take a hardline stance and then everyone hung up on me?
I was expecting like a feel-good story, not something we could have a discussion on, but it's fine. No discussion. That's it for this week. Yeah, we're gonna end it. Thanks, Brandon, for coming on.
Yeah.
Oh, gee, I was like, did you have to leave? No, Kramer messed up again. It's all right. We don't need him. It's over.
Very well.
But yeah, so yeah, thanks, Brandon, for coming on.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, follow us. Yeah, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. You can. Yeah, we put videos. Every podcast goes up as a video. Not with us. Just it's a video. You can listen to it. Like, subscribe, comment. Stop leaving and coming back. Yeah, that's it. Kramer's second blog post is coming out soon. He's actually finished it. We're in the process of just prepping it and putting it out. So that'll be great. Go ahead and read that. We'll tweet that out when we're ready. But we'll see you all next week.